Welcome back, and I'm going to continue on with our walkthrough of this web inspector. I would like to say that if you're enjoying the video and you're learning from it, please give it a like and also subscribe to my channel, because in future I plan to put out a lot of different content, development and programming related content. So yeah, I would appreciate that. So in this video, I'm going to cover the debugging and console part of the inspector. This is a bit of an advanced topic, so fair warning. So let's inspect our code here. So let me open the console first. So here I have 3-button setup. I'll show you the code as well. So I have 3-button setup with different actions. So here you can go to the console by clicking the console tab, and basically console is where you display your debug messages. Let me click on this first action to show you how the console works. So it's a simple console message. And as you can see, it logged out this message here. And if I go to my code, this is the code which is responsible for displaying the console log message. In order to console anything, you just use the console.log. Console is an object and it has this log function which displays the message. And this is useful when you want to display something in your browser while user takes an action, or you want to display an object, or for any reason you want to display any information, you use this. So there are a number of sections here. So you have error section, you have warning section, info section, and then you have no verbose section. So here you can do a bunch of things, by the way. So if I go to my code again, in my code I have defined a variable. Okay, so it's a variable containing 24, and there's a test function as well which returns the variable. So the good thing about the console is that you can literally grab those variables which are defined in the environment. So if I'm going to type here, let's say test variable, okay, it results into 24. And I can do different things here, which is if I do 24, it results into whatever the value of the test var was plus 20. And I can do the same thing with the function as well, which I already defined in my code. It's called test function. And here the F represents the function, so I have to use the brackets. So in console you can do a bunch of different things, which is let's say if you're trying to catch an error, you can either in your code or even here you can type console.error as a function, and you can give it a value. So this is an error, and what it's going to do, it's going to display the message here as an error with the red highlight. So this is useful when debugging some error that you might be receiving. And if you go to, if you can see here that it's showing in the error section. So let's say if I do, there's another command which is called console.info. This is some function. And if I type this here, so as you can see, it displayed as some information, but the good thing about this is that earlier we consoled the error message. So if I go to the error message, it's not going to display the information that was being displayed. But if I go to info, it's going to be displayed there. So you can segregate your console messages by the type of their value and the intention that you might have for the console. And same with the warning, you can use the console.warning as well. It's called console.warn. And you can display it here as a warning, and it's going to go inside the warning section. If you want to see all the messages at the same time, you can just click the messages tab and it's going to show everything together. So apart from that, there are a bunch of different console functions that could be useful for debugging the type of information that you might want to display. For example, if you have an array of different JSON objects with the same key value, you can display them as a table. So this is useful. So I'm going to click this button, and it displayed the values inside an array as a table here, which is very useful. And in addition to that, you can filter it out as well. You can sort it out. So if I click here, it's sorting out. And if I want to show you the definition, this is how the array was. So also in addition to that, if you want to display stack trace, if you're working with somebody else's code and you want to see where the code is being run from, you can use the console.trace function, which also displays the trace of the code. And then you have another console function, which is console.clear. And what it's going to do, it's going to clear the console area. So let's say you have a lot of different console messages in your code and you want another console message, but before that you want to clear out everything. You can use this function in order to clear everything out. And you can use the console.clear function even here. So the console area here is basically working as a JavaScript shell. You can write anything related to JavaScript here if you want, and you can even write functions and expressions, and it will work just like a JavaScript shell. So let me clear this first. So you can write even a function here. Let's say if I want to write a function, I can say function test. And if I want to enter a new line, I can just press Shift Enter, and it's going to enter a new line. So I can say alert testing, new line again, and then new line to run this function. So as you can see, it ran that function just like a normal JavaScript environment. So this is pretty useful. And also, if you have like a very cluttered console, you can just clear it from this button. It's going to clear out everything here. In addition to that, you can set a live expression here, which is going to update as the page updates. For example, if I want to say, give me the active element, so I can say document dot let's say active element. Okay, so currently it's the body. Let's say I click on the button, the active element become this button here, or if I click here, table, and then body again. So this is useful when you're trying to look for a specific element. If you have code running and you want to see the whole implementation of the code, you can just click on these links here. So in my case, I have a code in index.html. So if I click here, it's going to open the code and with the piece of code highlighted. So I can see the whole implementation here. I can press on the console again to go back. So let me clear out. Again, I'm going to remove this as well. And I'm going to hide this. So you have here console settings. And you can customize your console based on your liking. For example, I tend to not have the HTTP request in my console, so I just unchecked it. So what's going to happen if you reload the browser or refresh the browser, it's going to not keep the previous logs in the log itself. But if I check this, it's going to do that. So there are a bunch of cool options here which you can see by yourself. Okay, so now that we covered the console area, let's move on to the source panel where we can debug our JavaScript code and basically set breakpoints in order to debug a problem. So let's click on the sources section. Here, if you don't have a file open already, you can open it by pressing Command P and then opening the file that you want to debug. So in my case, it's index, so I'll open that. And before going into the debug, let's familiarize ourselves with the sections that we have here. So this is the code editor, and here you're going to do all your debug work. And then you have the file browser, which you can collapse with this icon. And then you have this JavaScript debugger area, where you have a bunch of different options where you can monitor your JavaScript. I'll go through them one by one. So one thing though, if you want to enable code folding here for your code editor, you can just press Command Shift P to open the command menu, and then find folding. So mine is already enabled, but you can enable it as well. So we have this simple program which takes two values, basically two integers, and add them together. So let's try this out and see how it works. So I'm going to enter 5 and then 20, so it should be 25. But unfortunately, as you can see, the result is not correct. It's showing 520, which is incorrect. So let's try going to debug this. So before I go to the debugging section, you can set up the debugger by the code itself. So let's say if I want to set a debugger anywhere in the code, I can say like debugger, just simple debugger, and save it. And if I press again, if I refresh again, it's going to stop the code execution right at this statement. So you can either set a debugger like this, or you can set key breakpoints, which I'll show you in a bit. So let me disable this first. Okay, so let's see what is the problem. So there is this code update label function, which is responsible for updating the value of the label. And we can see here that it's taking two numbers and summing them together and assigning them to a label here. So let's see what is the problem. So I'm going to set a breakpoint right in this code execution, which runs on click of the button. So you can set a breakpoint by clicking on the line itself in this area. Okay, so now it's set the breakpoint, and you can remove the breakpoint by clicking it again. So I'm going to set it right now, and then I'm going to refresh the page and see what happens. So okay, so it's running on click, so I have to enter the value and then click, then click the button. So let's say 2 and then 20. So let's run it. So as expected, it paused the execution right in this function. Okay, so let's go through the different options that we have here in order to navigate through the code. So as you can notice here, these are a bunch of buttons which are really useful. So let me explain one by one what each button does. So this button, resume code execution, it's going to run the code until the breakpoint reaches. So in this case, let's say if I set a breakpoint here. So now we have two breakpoints, one at this area and one at this area. So I'm going to refresh the page, and I'm going to enter the number and press enter. So now, as you can see, it stopped at the first breakpoint. And then if I press this again, it's going to stop at the second breakpoint. And this one, which is basically what it does, is it steps over to the next function call. So if I press it here, it's going to execute the next line and then move on. So let's remove this, this breakpoint. So what this button does, it steps inside the function, and it's going to run what's happened inside the function in the first line. So let me press this. So what it did, it jumped inside the update label and it stopped the code execution in the first line. Conversely, what this function is going to do is going to go out of the function and execute the next line, which is this one. And then you have a step button, which basically executes the code line by line. So if I'm going to press this again, so it went inside this function, as you can see. So let me step out of this function. Okay, again, I'm going to step inside this function and then step outside. And now we are here. So we can see here the value that we get from number 1 and number 2 is 2 and 25. Let's see what happens next if I press a step here. So this is really helpful here, which you can see that right next to the code, it's printing the value as is. And you don't need to console anything here. It's just printing the value by itself. And as we can see here in the sum variable, the result is 25. So what's happening here, that we can see that the result that we are getting from get number 1 and get number 2 function are the strings. And that's why when we are we're trying to sum up two strings together, and we are getting this result. So now we understood that we have to parse it as an integer, and then we can sum it. So let me fix that quickly. So I can do this. Parse int, same here. Save it, and then refresh. Let's remove the breakpoint here. And now if I run the code, as expected, it displayed the value correctly. So this is really useful in order to debug the nested code and see the result in real time, like what are the values stored in each of the variable. And these two buttons that we have additionally are this is going to deactivate all the breakpoints, and this one is going to stop at exception. So if there's an error, it's going to stop the code execution at that error until we figure out what's the problem. So let me go through these options quickly here. So call stack, basically it gives you the stack trace of the whole executions. So let me just quickly demonstrate this. So let's say I set a breakpoint here and then refresh the page and then run some code. So as I'm running, it's showing me the stack trace of the functions. So let's step into this function, update label. And as you can see, it's showing me in reverse chronological order, like what is the stack trace of the current execution. So first is update label, and then the second is on click. Here it's showing me the breakpoints, all the breakpoints that's set up. If I set another breakpoints, it's going to show me here as well with the line number. This is really useful because you can just click on it and quickly jump to the breakpoint itself. Let me collapse these. And then you have XHR fetch breakpoints. I'll go through these later on because these relate to a request that you might send an AJAX request or something like that. So what DOM breakpoints are, basically these are breakpoints that you can set up in the HTML in itself. And for example, I have this label which gets updated after I press this button. So let me add a breakpoint here, which is I'm going to set a breakpoint in subtree modification, which basically means that if anything under it gets modified, stop the execution right there. So let me add this. And if I go back to the sources, I can see here that this breakpoint is placed. So let me add some stuff here. So as you can see, it ran that breakpoint right here because at this point, the value is being updated. So let me remove this quickly. And then you have other breakpoints as well here, which you can set. For example, attribute modification, meaning that if any attribute got changed, it's going to stop the code execution. Same with the node removal. So if node is being deleted, it's going to stop the code execution. So then you have global listeners. I'll cover this later on. Event listener breakpoint. This is basically any event that is being triggered. It's going to stop the code execution. For example, let me demonstrate one here. So let me go to the mouse and then on click. So it should stop the code execution whenever the click is triggered. So let me press this again. So as you can see, stop the code execution right there. So here is going to show you all the variables that are being changed, locally or globally. So let me set up a quick example as you were doing before. So let's say here. Let's set a breakpoint here, refresh. Let's put a number. So as you can see, it is showing me the value of these two variables that we have for both of these variables. 23 and 32. So I can modify this even here. So for example, if I say 100, okay. So now if I save it, let's say I set another breakpoint here and press again. So as you can see, it didn't take the value from here, the one I entered, but instead it took the value which I modified here. And as you can see, the sum should be 132, and this is what's going to appear. So this is pretty useful when you have a bunch of different variables with different properties and you don't want to try to find the variables in the code itself. And this could be really useful because they're all gathered up in one place together and you can play with them, modify them, and see what are their values. So let me collapse this again, and let's see the watch, what it does. So this watch section, this is really handy as well because here you can add the variables that you want to watch. So in this area, it's going to show you all the variables, right? But in this section, you can filter out the variable that you want to watch For example, in my case here, I just want to see the result of the sum variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to add it here. Oops, sorry about that. So right now, as I can see, there's no value here. But if I run the code again, so even now there's no value because the code is not being executed yet. If we go to the scope area, it's going to show me all of the variables that I have, but in the watch, it's not going to show me all of the variables, just the one I added here. So let me press step. So it went to the next line, and as you can see here, it showed me the variable update, only the variable that I added. So this has been my tutorial on working with the debugger in Google Chrome. If you have any questions or suggestions, please send me in the comments below. And as always, if you like the video, please subscribe to me because I'll add more content in the similar topic as well. And thank you for watching.